Well, hi, gang. Marcus D coming at you all with a video I'm producing for the Great Questions group on this Saturday, the 16th of May, 2026. And folks, as you can tell by the title, this is what I'm calling Wood Splitting Redo. Some of you that have been around for a bit remember perhaps in 2024 in February, I did a video while I was doing some wood splitting because of some of the things that I was learning. Blessed Holy Spirit teaching us continuously if we're interested in these things. So anyway, I have been doing some more wood splitting and some more things that I'm learning. And I thought it would take, I've been thinking about this for a little bit because I've been doing this for probably, I guess, maybe coming up on a month. I'll show you, I ended up with two. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and I'll flip this camera so that I can tell you a little bit what's going on. So let's do. Okay, so gang, here what ended up happening is this pile over here, the pile that I split last time was long gone because I ended up doing 2025 and 2026. As you may remember, there wasn't a whole lot of wood that I had to split, but what has ended up happening is of course we had those two polar vortexes, reasonably cold winters. I burned the wood up, so I had none. Well, anyway, my next door neighbors had some trees taken out. I talked to the guy. He brought me a bunch of wood that you can see on the left there. And so I was like, well, that's great. I'll split that when I get a chance. Well, then last summer I lost one of my own trees, and that's some of the residual of that. Both of these piles were larger, and what you see now is the results of what I've been doing. I haven't been going to the gym because I can't do both. Not that I go to the gym a whole lot anymore, a couple times a week, but I haven't been to the gym since I've been splitting the wood. I can only do a little bit at a time, but as always, I have been learning some things that I thought I would just quickly share with you that are spiritual analogies. And, you know, probably the most significant is, you've heard us talk many, many times about rewards in heaven and the process of earning those rewards. Well, you know, when I started off with this wood, it looked like, obviously there was no split wood. All there was two huge piles of wood. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and pause this and flip the camera, and we'll go down and I'll show you some stuff and talk to you just for this. This won't be very long, just a few minutes. Okay, so hang on. Okay, and the main theme to most of this is, of course, spiritual growth and this reality that we've talked about many times, that everything in heaven is not going to be equal for everybody. And there's my next door neighbor's dog barking at me. Hello, hello. That's his favorite pastime. Here, I'll turn the camera and I'll show you. Okay, there he is. Say hello to everybody. His little tail's wagging. But anyway, the reality, flip it back, the reality, I'll get away from him so he doesn't keep barking. First of all, one of the things that I have realized, a couple things I wanted to point out. Number one is the wood that is in the sun for a while is easier to split, okay, because it gets seasoned. You can tell it's darker. As a matter of fact, I'm going to flip it back and I'll show you again. You can see those three pieces right there are very light. They were covered. This piece right here is dark. That piece right there is dark. As a matter of fact, you can see the ones that I've started splitting. Well, it just struck me too, okay? One of the things that God is continually doing in our lives is He is helping us to grow. And so what's interesting is the more the wood is in the sun, okay, the easier it is. I'm going to turn the camera back around. The easier it is, in other words, the more we look at Him, the more it's easier for us and Him together to sanctify us, which is what the purpose is. I'll tell you something else I've been following along here. I talked about what's interesting is the tools of so over here in my corner I got my wedges, and then I have the maul that I referred to last time, and I also have the sledgehammer. Okay, but the interesting thing is, I'm going to switch the camera back. It's a beautiful analogy to the golf swing, because or hitting a baseball or playing tennis. Let the club do the work, okay? And there's two ways you can split wood. One of the ways is you take that wedge, okay, and you try to hit it with that sledgehammer, doing all your energy, okay? Or you let the inertia, you swing the sledgehammer, you hit, and you let the weight and the inertia and the mass of the sledgehammer hit the wedge. And in other words, if you've got the wood that's been in the sun, and you're swinging, you get a lot more done with a lot less energy. Well, what's the spiritual analogy to that? Okay, letting God's Spirit work with us and work in us. And I'll tell you something else about hitting that wedge. It applies to all these other sports. It applies to life. It applies to business. It applies to anything else that we have a goal in, and that is keeping the eye on the target. And what's interesting is it's this amazing mechanism that God has built into our mind and our body, how our eyes, keeping our eye on the target. As we, if I keep my eye on the top of that wedge and I just focus on that, it's amazing how I can just swing, and that, the head of that sledgehammer, which is not very big, and the top of the wedge, which is not very big, it will hit it. I let my mind wander, man, all kinds of things happen. I miss, I overhit, sometimes you can break the, you break the shaft, the handle, because you're overstriking, and what ends up, again, the wedge hits the wood or the plastic or whatever. So you got to keep your eye on it. Same thing with the golf swing, baseball, business, goals. I remember when I was in the business, okay, keeping your mind. Well, the spiritual analogy. What is the spiritual analogy? That keeping our eyes on Christ. I think of Peter when he got out of the boat. Christ was walking on the water. Jesus and the disciples were in the boat. They're blown away. Peter, good old Peter, man. He goes, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come. Christ says, come. Well, he starts walking on the water to Jesus. Jesus on the water, he's on the water. Well, what happens? He takes his eye off Christ, starts looking around. Here's the waves and everything else. Starts freaking out. Boom, he starts sinking. Well, it's a perfect analogy. I'm amazed at how God has made these bodies where all I have to do is keep my eyes on the top of that wedge and it'll hit it. I don't have to worry about, how my brain is doing what it's doing, how it's sending the information to the nerves and in my, my muscles and my arms and my bones and all that stuff. And, I can swing, and, it hits the top of the wedge. It's the most incredible thing. And so again, that spiritual analogy of staying focused on the target. And not only that, folks, but I'll tell you this too. There's a beautiful analogy to the power of God's Spirit working in us. Because again, when we just do all of those things, we keep our eye on the target. Like I said, we find the seasoned wood, we swing, okay, we don't have to expend as much energy. I may have already said that, I don't know. I can't check my notes on this because I tried it, and if I try to pause the phone and check my notes, it stops the video. I'd have to start over again. So anyway, I know there's ways to splice all these things together, and I'll eventually get to that, but for right now, I don't want to deal with it. But what I also want to say is, I'll share this with you too, okay? Even between 24 and 25, or 26, it was February, I believe, of 24. Now it's May, as I think I've already said, 2026. I can tell a little bit of difference with the bod, okay, that I have to do a little bit at a time, all right? I come out and, when I can, and probably for 2.5 hours, I just take my time and I split whatever wood I can. But here's the last thing I want to mention. I showed you those piles, and we talked so much about spiritual riches in heaven, okay, and how this life is really about setting ourselves up for the next. And of course, we have to do that in the unseen. We've talked about that many times. We have to grow our spiritual eyes to be able to see. But I've been watching this wood split, okay? And, again, I already showed you the pile. Flip the phone one more time. It's, like I said, I'm going to measure it. I'm just kind of curious. Anyway, it's a pretty big stack. I'll do a little bit at a time, okay? But here's the point, all right? I'm going to flip this back. Here's the point. When I see that wood, okay, in my mind, I'm thinking about spiritual growth. I'm thinking about eternal treasures. I'm thinking about, it takes, a little bit at a time. It seems like, not accomplishing a whole lot each time, but, we just do a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. Next thing you know, you got a pile of wood that's growing. Well, in the unseen, as we honor our great God, we live for him more and more. We stay in his word, we pray, we work on sanctifying ourselves, witnessing as we can, sharing the good news, but mainly, folks, allowing God's Spirit with us to sanctify us, to carry those crosses, to do a little, like we talked about, a little less of this, a little more of that as he gives us witness, okay? We're storing up that same pile, as it were, in eternity. And you know, one of the things I do, my devotional desk, as a matter of fact, I'll show you this, okay? That lone window up there is my devotional desk looks out, okay? That's my office up there now. And so anyway, what's interesting is I look out on this wood pile, and every time I go back up there, I've expended energy and effort, and but the pile grows. All right. Well, the same thing's going on in heaven if we're investing. All right. And the beautiful thing is, that delayed gratification that we learn in business. I remember that one of my mentors, a gentleman by the name of John in the business, and actually it was his wife, Jenny Bell. She would say, I am willing to do today what others aren't, so that later I can live like others can't. All right. And of course, they were talking about the discipline of, putting some of their delayed gratification. They used to talk about that all the time, giving, setting aside, not giving it up, but setting aside some of the things that you enjoy now to build a business so that you had the time to enjoy them later. I remember talking about golf, put the golf clubs up for a couple of years, so you don't have to try to play on the weekends when it's crowded and maybe, dog track courses. And then you can play anytime you want, high dollar courses all around the world. You'll be doing that. And that was one of my dreams. And I did that for quite a while until I realized that, I got a little bit higher calling, and and your body's going down and your spirit's going up, and you're like, hey, a little less of this, a little more of that. Okay. But the interesting thing, it's the same thing with this. All right. Being willing to do today, spiritually. So that later on, folks, God is not mocked. As we sow, we reap. All right? And every little thing we do to try to honor him, that's in accordance with his will and his word, not just any arbitrary thing we decide, I'm doing this for you, God. Well, is that anything in his word, that's talking about? People are doing all kinds of crazy things and saying, I'm doing it for God. And that's better than just saying I'm doing it for myself, I guess. But the point is, the more we line up with God's word, that's one of those other spiritual disciplines. We've got to keep our nose in there, even though it seems like Chinese at first or a foreign language. Little by little, we learn the language. It's amazing, and then it becomes second nature to us. All right, but that point, of storing up now so that we can enjoy later. And you know what thing about this wood? The Lord doesn't come back, and we make it to next winter, because I'm telling you, gang, we got to live like any moment he could be. I'm planning in case he doesn't, but I'm living like he could. All right. But if he doesn't, you know what I'm going to be doing? You know what I think about too? I'm going to be able to enjoy all that split wood next winter when it's cold. It's freezing cold. I'll have wood to put in my wood stove. All right. Well, take all that up to the highest analogy, because what we're storing up spiritually is forever. It's eternal. It's going to last forever, gang. And, it's the best investment we can make in this brief little period of time called life, which is so frail, it's so fragile, it's uncertain, and that's what this life is about. It's about learning and seeing that ever more clearly and saying, hey, I want to invest forever. And it's interesting. Last thing I'm going to say, it was actually a theme song from I don't know if they've done another one since, but it was the most recent Beauty and the Beast that Disney did. It was the live version, okay? And there was the song, how can a moment last forever? How can a story never die? But there's another portion of that says, minutes turn to hours, days to years, then gone. How can a moment last forever? And in that song, it says, when our song lives on. Well, no. Listen, how can a moment last forever in this life? Only when we send it on. All right? When we send it on. And that's what you and I are doing. Every little piece, any little, the feeblest efforts we have to try to honor this great God, okay? Storing up stuff that we're never going to lose. Okay, and so I want to share that with you, and it's like the Spirit just popped this into my head. Let me just ask you this. Mark, let me just ask you this: how do you start your day every day? Okay, How do we start our day? Do we just get out of bed and right away, oh, I got a list of all these things to do, and boom, 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 and we barely give God a second notice? Or, okay, I guess that was a new one on me. Anyway, almost done here. But how are we starting our day? Do we just take a moment and say, Lord, help me? You know, I got this day ahead of me. It's another day you've given me. It's another day closer to my grand destiny. You know, is our spirit, let me just say this and I'm done. Is our spiritual life, is our spirit devotional time? That's what I want to, is our devotional time in the morning getting a little better or not? Is it even there? Okay. That's a way to build your spiritual woodpile. Okay. God bless you guys. Until next time, Marcus D signing off. Take care. Bye-bye.